before the mountains, before the sea, before the first star ever pierced the veil of the night, there was only chaos. Now when we hear this word, chaos, our modern minds tend to think of confusion. We think of disorder, a messy room, a loud and frantic scene. But the chaos of the ancient Hellenic world was something different. It was something far more vast and far more simple. The word itself, chaos, comes from a verb meaning to yawn or to gape open. Chaos was not a storm of colliding things. Chaos was the absence of things. It was the gaping void, the chasm. Imagine, if you can, what it would be like to exist in a place with no direction. No up, no down, no left, no right, no here and no there. Imagine a state of being with no light, and yet not even darkness, for darkness is a thing, a presence, and this was the absence of presence. There was no sound, for there was nothing to make a sound. No air to carry a vibration. There was no heat and no cold. There was only the gap. A vast, illimitable, unending possibility. A quiet, still, breathless potential. Everything that would ever be, everything that would ever live and breathe and strive and dream was held, unformed within this boundless, silent, waiting void. There was no time. No clocks were ticking. No seasons were turning. No suns were rising or setting. There was only the is-not, the grand, formless, unthinking state of before. Try to feel that sensation. The feeling of absolute stillness. Not the stillness of a quiet forest, which is full of tiny living sounds. Not the stillness of a deep cave, which has the pressure of the rock and the cool dampness of the air. This was the stillness of the absolute zero. The quiet of non-existence. It was not empty, precisely, for empty implies a container that could be filled. Chaos was the container and the lack of content, all at once. It was the womb of the universe, waiting for the first stirring of thought, the first impulse of creation. In this yawning chasm, this silent, formless, endless waiting, the first things began to be. They did not appear with a sound. There was no thunderclap, no grand explosion. It was, perhaps, more like a thought forming in a sleeping mind. A slow, gradual coalescing. A separation of one thing from the general nothing. The first to emerge from this profound stillness was not a god. It was a principle. It was a foundation. From chaos there came Gaia. The emergence of Gaia, imagine that endless, directionless void. And now imagine within it the first thing. The first substance. Gaia. The earth. She was the first solid thing. The first foundation. The ancient poet Hesiod, in his Theogony, the story of the birth of the gods, calls her the broad-bosomed. She is the ever-sure foundation of all. Feel that. After an eternity of formlessness, suddenly, there is a place. There is a ground. There is a here. Gaia's arrival was not a violent birth. It was a settling, a gathering, like particles of dust in a void slowly drawing together, bound by some new, unknown law. At first, perhaps just a mote, a speck of substance in the infinite chasm. But it grew. It coalesced. It became firm. She was the earth. Not a goddess walking on the earth, but the earth itself. The rock. The soil. The substance. Her very being was stability. Close your eyes and feel that sensation. Imagine the feeling of being formless, adrift in the void, and then the sudden, gentle, sure feeling of solid ground beneath you. The feeling of weight. The feeling of place. The comfort of a foundation. This was Gaia. She was vast. She was wide. She spread out in all directions, a great, solid disk floating in the nothing. She was cool. She was still. She was the very essence of substance. Think of the scent of damp soil after a rain. Think of the coolness of a smooth river stone held in your palm. Think of the unyielding strength of a mountain's granite heart. All of this was Gaia. She was not yet alive in the way we think of it. There were no trees, no grasses, no creatures moving upon her surface. She was just the potential for life, the stay, the nurturing ground upon which all things would eventually grow. She was the Great Mother, the Mater, the source of all nourishment, all stability, all life that was to come. But she was not yet a mother. She was just the beginning of form. In her, the universe found its first anchor. The formless void of chaos now had a center, a here, and with the creation of a here, other things too became possible. With the arrival of Gaia, the principle of stability and form, two other primordial beings also emerged, separating themselves from the void. They were not her children, not yet. They were her siblings, her counterparts, beings born of the same mysterious, initial stirring within chaos. The deep counterparts, Tartarus and Eros as Gaia, represented the solid foundation, the surface. Another being emerged to define the opposite. Tartarus. If Gaia was the steady earth, Tartarus was the pit beneath the earth. He was the great abyss, the deep. Hesiod describes Tartarus as a place as far beneath the earth as the earth is beneath the sky. He says that a brazen anvil dropped from the surface of Gaia would fall for 9 nights and 9 days, and on the 10th, it would reach the dark, misty, dreadful realm of Tartarus. Imagine that feeling, the sensation of infinite, dizzying depth, a chasm within the chasm. While chaos was the formless void, Tartarus was the defined void. It was the basement of the universe. He was a person, a primordial deity, but he was also the place. A place of gloom, a place of staggering, unthinkable depth, a place walled with bronze, where the roots of the earth and the unharvested sea began. It was not yet a place of punishment. That would come much, much later, when there were beings to punish. For now, it was simply the depth, the dark counterpart to Gaia's broad, light-facing breast. Feel the contrast, the reassuring solidity of Gaia and the profound, echoing, cold emptiness of Tartarus. The one holds you up, the other calls you down. The new universe, still just a whisper of itself, was beginning to have dimension. It had a surface. It had a depth. But one more thing was needed. A force. An energy. And so the third of these initial emergences, alongside Gaia and Tartarus, was Eros. When we hear the name Eros, we think of the small, winged boy with a bow and arrow, the one the Romans called Cupid. But that is a much, much later diminished version. The primordial Eros was something else entirely. He was not the god of love. He was the principle of love. He was desire, attraction, the fundamental force of union. Hesiod calls him the fairest among the deathless gods. He is the one who loosens the limbs and overcomes the mind and wise counsels of all gods and all men. Before Eros, things simply were. Chaos was. Gaia was. Tartarus was. They were separate, isolated, static. Eros was the verb. He was the impulse that draws one thing to another. He was the energy that would allow the universe to create. He was the binding force, the cosmic glue. Without Eros, Gaia would remain barren. The gods would never be born. The universe would be a collection of static, lonely principles. Eros was the spark, the desire for completion, the longing of one thing for another that allows for all creation, all art, all life. Imagine the universe as a collection of dust motes. Eros is the gravity that pulls them together to form a star. Imagine it as a silent room full of unplayed instruments. Eros is the desire to make music. He was the first motion, the first longing. And so, the first trinity of principles was established. Gaia the foundation, Tartarus the deep, and Eros the desire. The stage was set. The driving force was present. But the stage was still dark. The chasm of chaos was still the dominant feature. And from that chasm, from chaos itself, came the first true children. The children of chaos, Erebus and Nyx chaos, the great gaping void, remained. And from itself, without any partner, it produced two children. These were not children of substance, like Gaia. They were children of the state of chaos. They were its essence, given form. They were Erebus and Nyx. Erebus was the darkness, the profound, impenetrable gloom. If chaos was the void, Erebus was the shadow that filled it. He was the darkness of the deep, the gloom of the underworld, the shadows that lay beneath the edges of Gaia. He was not evil. He was just dark, the pure, undiluted principle of the absence of light. Imagine the deepest part of the ocean, miles beneath the sun, where no light has ever touched. That is Erebus. Imagine the inside of a sealed tomb. That is Erebus. He was the brother of night, and he was her shadow. And then there was Nyx. Nyx, night. She was one of the most powerful, most ancient, and most feared of all the primordial beings. Even Zeus, the king of the gods who would be born much, much later, would be described as holding Nyx in awe, afraid to anger her. Nyx was not just the time of darkness. She was the personification of night itself. She was a figure of profound, shadowy beauty and immense, quiet power. She was the veil that was drawn over the world, the coolness that settled over the new-formed earth of Gaia. While Erebus was the static, heavy gloom of the deep, Nyx was the active night. The night that travels, the night that falls, the night that covers all. Her substance was the shadow. Her breath was the cool night air. Her cloak was the dark, starry sky that would one day be. She was the goddess of secrets, of mysteries, of the unknown. She was the mother of all things that thrive in the darkness. Feel her presence. The profound, enveloping, comforting, and perhaps slightly unnerving presence of the night. The stillness. The quiet. The invitation to rest, to sleep, to dream. She was the great, dark, beautiful mother, and she shared the vast, formless realm with her brother Erebus. These two, Erebus and Nyx, were the first coupling. In the deep, dark realm, drawn together by the new force of Eros, they joined. Darkness and night. And from their union, something entirely unexpected was born. From the two darkest principles in existence came their absolute opposites. From Nyx and Erebus came Ether and Hemera. But before we speak of the first light, we should pause. For the story I have just told you, the tale of Hesiod, is the most common, but it is not the only one. The beauty of these ancient myths is that they were not written in a single, unchangeable book. They were told around hearths, sung by poets. And different tellings from different regions imagine the beginning in different ways. The Orphic variation, an alternate beginning in some tellings of this story, particularly those from a tradition known as the Orphic Mysteries, the beginning was different. These tellings suggest that before all else, before chaos, before Gaia, there were two other principles. Cronus and Aninc. Cronus was time. Not the god Cronus, the Titan, who would come later, but Cronus. Time itself. The unaging, unending, relentless passage of moments. He was imagined as a great serpent, coiled around the universe. And with him was his consort, Aninc. necessity, fate, the unalterable law of what must be. Imagine these two forces, time and necessity. The universe in this telling did not begin in a formless void, but was bound from its very first instant by law and by duration. In this ancient, quiet, time-bound state, Cronus and Ankh coiled together produced an egg, a great shining silver egg. This was the cosmic egg, the mundane egg. And for ages, it floated in the boundlessness. It was the seed of the universe, waiting. And then from within it cracked. And the being who emerged was not Gaia. It was not Zeus. It was a being of pure, radiant light. His name was Phanes, the Shining One. He was the firstborn protogonos. He was a being of incomprehensible beauty, with golden wings and the heads of various creatures. He was both male and female. And he was Eros, the same primordial Eros, the force of love, but imagined here not as an emergent principle, but as the first creator. Phanes, the shining, radiant being of love, hatched from the cosmic egg. And the two halves of the eggshell separated. One became the sky. The other became the earth. And Phanes, this winged god of light and love, set the universe in motion. He was the creator. In this version, Nyx the night was sometimes seen as the mother of Phanes, the one who laid the egg. Or she was his daughter. The relationships are fluid, dreamlike. But the core idea is beautiful. That the universe was not an accident of the void, but was hatched from an egg, and that the very first being to emerge was love. It's a different path to the same destination. A different dream of the before. But for now, let us return to the telling of Hesiod. Let us return to the darkness of Nyx and Erebus, the new children of chaos. They have just joined, and their own children are about to be born. The union of night and darkness, Aether and Hemera in the profound, deep, unlit expanse, Erebus, the gloom, and Nyx, the night came together. And from this union of absolute shadow came the first light. Their firstborn was Aether. Aether was not the light of the sun. The sun did not exist. Aether was the upper air, the pure, shining, ethereal substance that the gods themselves would one day breathe. If Gaia was the foundation and Tartarus was the pit, Aether was the sky. But not the sky we see. He was the highest sky, the pure, bright blue essence of the heavens. He was the light of the above. Imagine the first light. Not a harsh, sudden glare, but a slow, gentle, pearlescent glow beginning to fill the upper reaches of the void. A soft, radiant, shining mist. A breathable light. It was the first brightness. The first thing to banish the all-encompassing dark of his parents. And with Aether came his sister, Hemera. Hemera was day. If Nyx, her mother, was the process of night falling, Hemera was the process of day dawning. She was the daytime, the period of light. And so the first, great cycle of the new universe was born. Aether, the shining upper air, was the place of light. Hemera, the day, was the time of light. And now a pattern began. Nyx, the night, would draw her dark, misty veil across the cosmos, spreading out from her home in the depths of Tartarus. And as she advanced, her daughter Hemera would retreat. This was the night time. And then, as Nyx returned to her dark domain, Hemera would emerge, scattering her mother's shadows and bringing the bright, shining air of Aether to the world. This was the daytime. And so, for the first time, there was rhythm. There was a cycle. Night and day. Darkness and light. The universe now had a foundation, Gaia. It had a depth, Tartarus. It had a driving force, Eros. It had its foundational darkness, Erebus, and its traveling night, Nyx. and now it had its light Ether and its day Hemera. The new world was still empty. It was still just a collection of great, vast, elemental beings. But it was beginning. It had a shape. It had a rhythm. And now the mothers of this new world, Night and Earth, began to create, each in her own way. And the children of Nyx, the children she bore alone, without a partner, were a host of beings that would shape the destiny of all who came after. The progeny of Night alone, Nyx, the great, veiled, primordial Night, was a force of immense power. And from her own essence, without joining with Erebus, she brought forth a collection of children. These were not gods of substance. They were not made of earth or light. They were like their mother, concepts. They were the personifications of the great, invisible forces that would govern life. And because they were born of night alone, many of them were dark. They were the forces that mortals would come to fear and to respect. Imagine the deep, quiet, starless dark. And from that dark, one by one, these beings emerge. First there was Maros, doom, the fate that is assigned to you, your lot in life. The inevitable. He was the cold, quiet understanding that all things have an end. And his brother Kur, destiny, or more specifically, the violent end, the doom of the battlefield. And with them their brother Thanatos, death. He was not a violent force. He was not a king. He was simply death, the gentle, inevitable final sleep. He was described as having a heart of iron, a soul of bronze, but he was not hated by the gods. He was a necessity. He was the one who comes to all quietly, to carry them away to the gloom. And with Thanatos came his twin brother, Hypnos, sleep. Hypnos was the gentle counterpart to his brother. He lived in a dark cave in the underworld, where the river of forgetfulness, Lethe, flowed. No light ever reached his domain. No sound. It was a place of absolute, perfect, unbroken quiet. Hypnos' sleep would drift over the land, invisible, touching the eyes of mortals and gods, bringing them rest, bringing them respite. He was a comforter, a healer, a kind and gentle god, beloved by all. And from Hypnos came his children, the Oneiroi. The dreams. There were 1,000 of them. The dreams were the spirits who would fly out from the cave of sleep each night. They were shapeshifters. They could take any form. They would come to mortals in their slumber. Some of them, like Morpheus, were the true dreams, the ones who could shape themselves into the forms of men and bring messages from the gods. They would pass through a gate of polished horn. But others were the false dreams, the phobters, the frighteners, and the phantaso, the fantasies. They were the confusing, nonsensical, and terrifying dreams. They would pass through a gate of carved, white ivory. And so from night came doom and death, but also sleep and dreams. But she bore others too. She bore Momus, blame, the spirit of harsh criticism, of mockery, of finding fault in all things. He was the god who would be exiled from the company of the gods for his sharp, relentless complaints. And his sister Oises, misery, woe, the personification of suffering, of sadness, of the ache in the human heart. And then came the Hesperides, the nymphs of the evening. These were not dark, but they were of the dusk. They were the 3 goddesses who lived in a beautiful garden at the far western edge of the world, near the Atlas Mountains. In their garden grew a tree of golden apples, which was a wedding gift to a goddess who was not yet born. They guarded this tree, singing with clear, beautiful voices in the twilight. And Nyx bore the Morai, the Fates. These were, perhaps, her most powerful and most feared children. 3 sisters. Clotho, the spinner, she was the one who spun the thread of every life. Lachesis, the allotter, she was the one who measured the thread. She decided its length, its quality, its twists, and its turns. And Atropos, the unturnable, the inflexible. She was the one who, when the time came, would cut the thread with her dreaded shears. These three sisters, Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos, held the destiny of every mortal and every god. Even the greatest gods could not overrule the fates. They were the ultimate law, the destiny that Nyx had given birth to. And finally, Nyx bore Nemesis. Retribution. Nemesis was the goddess of divine anger. She was the force that ensured balance. If any mortal or god displayed too much hubris, too much pride, if they became too arrogant, too sure of themselves, Nemesis would be the one to bring them low. She was the inevitable, righteous anger that restores the balance of the cosmos. And she bore Apate deceit, Philote's friendship, but also illicit passion, and Gaira's old age. All of these forces that define our lives, doom, death, sleep, dreams, misery, blame, fate, and retribution, they all came from one place. They were all born of the quiet, dark, beautiful, and terrifying mind of Nyx. The night. The cosmos was now populated by these invisible, powerful forces. But what of Gaia? What of the earth? She was still a vast, empty, barren plain. She too was a mother. And she too would create children. But her children would be different. They would be seen. They would be substance. The solo births of Gaia. Ouranos, Aurea, Pontus, Gaia, the broad-bosomed earth, felt the stirring of Eros, the desire to create. But she was alone on her vast, solid plain. And so, like Nyx, she conceived and bore children from herself. But her children were not abstract forces. Her children were places. They were extensions of her own substance. First, she bore a child equal to herself, one who could cover her completely. She bore Ouranos, the sky. Imagine the surface of the earth, and then imagine rising from that surface, a great, solid, starry dome. That was Ouranos. He was the sky. He was not just air. He was a vast, solid, overarching presence. The starry mantle. The heavens. He was the first roof for the world. He arched over her, a perfect, vast, shining counterpart. He was the above. And at night he was a cloak of dark blue, speckled with the first stars. And in the day he was the bright blue dome, lit by the passage of Hemera. He was the first male deity of substance. And he looked down upon Gaia, the mother who bore him, and he was filled with love for her, and he settled upon her, covering her entirely. Gaia had created her equal, her mate, but she was not finished. She looked upon her own vast, flat surface, and she desired dimension. And so she gave birth to the Aurea, the mountains. From her flat plains she pushed up with a great, slow, groaning effort, the first great mountain ranges. The Aurea were not on the earth. They were the earth rising up. They were the first high places, the first peaks to touch the new, bright ether, the first places to catch the glow of Hemera. They were her rugged, stony, pine-clad sons, the great, silent, watching peaks that gave a new shape, a new texture to the world. Feel the world changing. From a simple, flat disk, it now has an above Ouranos, and it has high places, the Aurea. And still Gaia was not finished. Her surface was dry. It was just soil and rock. And so she created one more child from herself. She created Pontus, the sea. He was not the great, world-encircling ocean who would come later. Pontus was the sea itself, the barren, surging salt-water deep. He was the great, swelling, restless water that filled the hollows and basins of the earth. Imagine the sound. After an eternity of silence, followed by the quiet rhythm of night and day, now there is a new sound. The sound of waves, the hiss of foam, the great, deep, rhythmic sigh of the sea against the new-formed land. Pontus was the water, the restless, powerful, unharvested deep. And so Gaia alone had given form to the world. She had created the sky above her Ouranos. She had created the mountains upon her, the Aurea. And she had created the sea within her Pontus. The world was now recognizable. It had an earth. It had a sky. It had mountains. It had a sea. It had night and day. It had light and dark. And it was populated by the invisible forces of destiny, sleep, and death. The stage was set. The primordial beings, the protogen, had done their work. They had emerged from the gaping void. They had given the universe shape, dimension, rhythm, and law. Chaos, the great formless chasm, was now filled. It was filled with a world. And in this new world, the two greatest beings of substance, Gaia the earth and Ouranos the sky, lay together, wrapped in the energy of Eros. Upon the vast, broad breast of Gaia the earth lies Ouranos the sky. He covers her completely, a perfect starry blanket pressing down upon her. And in this constant, unending embrace, fueled by the ancient, powerful, creative force of Eros, the first great shaping energy Gaia conceives. Within her, in the deep, secret places of the earth, the first true generation of gods begins to form. They are not like the primordial forces before them. They are not just principles. They are beings. They have thought. They have form. They have will. These are the children of earth and sky. The firstborn, the 12 Titans, the first children born to Gaia and Ouranos, were 12 in number. 6 sons and 6 daughters. They were vast. Their forms were beautiful but immense. They were larger than the mountains, stronger than the sea. They were the first rulers of the new universe. They were the Titans. Let us meet them. Let us feel their presence. The first of the sons was Oceanus. Oceanus was not the salt sea, Pontus, that lay in the hollows of the earth. Oceanus was something far, far greater. He was the great river, the river that encircled the entire world. Imagine a vast, freshwater current, flowing in a mighty, endless circle around the very edges of the flat disk of Gaia. His waters were the source of all other waters. Every river that would one day flow, every spring that would bubble up from the earth, every cloud that would carry rain, all had their origin in the great, swirling, endless stream that was Oceanus. He was a being of profound depth and of constant, steady, quiet motion. He was not a god of storms or rage. He was the god of the boundary, the limit of the known world. He was gentle in his way, but immeasurably powerful. His beard was long, flowing like water itself, and his horns were often depicted as those of a bull, a symbol of fertile, creative power. He was the great outer limit. With him came his sister and later his wife Tethys. Tethys was the nurse, the nourisher. If Oceanus was the great river, Tethys was the source of that river, the subterranean waters that fed him. She was the mother of the rivers. She was the mother of the 3,000 river gods, the Patamoi, who would one day carve their way through the land. And she was the mother of the 3,000 Oceanids, the nymphs of the sea, the spirits of the springs and the waters. She was the great watery, nurturing mother. Together, Oceanus and Tethys formed the world's water cycle, a great balanced, life-giving system. Then there was the son, Cronus. Cronus was the titan of the intellect, the questioning mind. His name means question or query. He was the first stirring of a mind that seeks to understand. He was also associated with the axis of the heavens, the great, invisible pole around which the starry dome of his father, Ouranos, appeared to turn. He was the god of the celestial axis, the pillar of the north. He was the one who knew the movements of the stars, the first intellect, the first seed of science of knowing. His sister and wife was Phoebe. Phoebe. Her name means bright or shining. She was the Titaness of radiance of prophecy. She was associated with the clear, bright mind that receives wisdom, just as Cronus was the mind that seeks it. She would become the second goddess to hold power at the great oracle of Delphi, that place where the gods would one day speak to mortals. She was the bright, clear, knowing light. Then there was Cronus. Cronus was a titan of the south. He was seen as another of the great pillars that held the heavens, the pillar of the south. But he was also the titan of the constellations. He was the one who ordered the stars, who governed their rising and setting. He was the master of the great, turning heavenly flocks that moved across the sky. A quiet, steady, powerful presence. His sister was Theia. Theia, whose name simply means goddess or divine. She was the titaness of sight and of value. She was the one who gave the sparkle to gold, the shimmer to silver, the deep inner fire to gemstones. She was the one who gave the sky its clear, blue, shining quality. She was the radiance of the bright, clear day. She was the mother of the sun, the moon, and the dawn. Then came the sun, Hyperion, the one who moves above. Hyperion was the titan of heavenly light. He was the pillar of the east. He was the first being associated with the sun. Not the sun god himself, not yet, but the principle of the light from above. The great, watchful, all-seeing eye of the day. He and Theia, light and sight, were a natural pair. They were the parents of the light itself. His sister was Rhea. Rhea was the great, gentle mother. She was the titaness of fertility, of motherhood, of the easy, gentle flow of life. Her name means flow or ease. She was the comfort of the earth, the gentle, nurturing, quiet presence. She was destined to become the mother of the greatest gods of all. Then there was Iapetus. Iapetus was the titan of the west, the pillar that held the sky there. His name is sometimes translated as the piercer. He was a being of a different sort. He was associated with craftsmanship, but also with mortality. He was the father of the titans who would shape mankind. He was the father of Prometheus, the one who would give fire to mortals, and of Atlas, who would be doomed to hold the sky. Iapetus was the beginning of the story of mortals. His sister was Themis. Themis, divine law. She was not the law of kings, or the laws men write. She was the natural law, the order of things, the way things should be. She was the custom, the tradition, the divine order of the cosmos. She was the voice of the earth, the one who knew what was right. She too would one day sit at Delphi. She was the very embodiment of divine, unshakable justice. And finally, there was the sister Mnemosyne. Mnemosyne, memory. Imagine that. In a world this new, memory itself had to be born. She was the one who remembered all that had happened. She was the one who held the past. Without her, there could be no stories, no knowledge passed down, no history. She was the mother of the 9 muses, the spirits of inspiration, of art, of poetry, of history. She was the well from which all creativity would one day spring. These were the 12. 6 brothers, 6 sisters. Oceanus, Cronus, Creus, Hyperion, Iapetus. Tethys, Phoebe, Theia, Rhea, Themis, Mnemosyne. But there was one more. The youngest of the sons. The last of the titans to be born. His name was Cronus. Cronus, the youngest and the most terrible. He was the titan of the harvest, the one who cuts, but he was also the Titan of ambition, of cunning. He was the only one of his siblings who felt resentment. He felt the constant, heavy, oppressive presence of his father, Ouranos, pressing down upon his mother, Gaia. He felt the constraint, the lack of space. He was quiet. He watched, and he hated his father. These 12 great beings were held within the body of Gaia. They were immense. They were powerful. And they were just the beginning. For Gaia, in her endless fertility, bore more children to Ouranos. But these new children were different. The monstrous broods, the Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires, after the birth of the 12 beautiful, vast Titans, Gaia conceived again. And this time, the children she bore were not beautiful. They were forces of nature. They were chaotic. First, she bore 3 sons. They were the Cyclopes. Their names were Bronze, which means thunder, Steropes, which means lightning, and Arges, which means bright or vivid flash. They were giants. Their strength was staggering, beyond measure. But their most defining feature was that each of them had only one eye, set in the middle of his forehead. A single round, piercing eye. They were not just monsters. They were the first and greatest of all smiths. They were masters of the forge. They were the spirits of the volcano. Imagine them. Deep within the earth, in the fiery heart of the mountains, they set up their first anvils. And the sound of their work was the first thunder. The boom of Bronze's hammer. The flash of Arges as he struck the metal. The hissing of the lightning bolt Steropes as he quenched the white-hot steel. They were unruly. They were loud. They were beings of smoke and fire and unbridled, creative, destructive energy. They had hearts of stone. They were proud and they were stubborn. And they were terrifying. And Ouranos, the sky, looked down, or rather, felt them moving within the earth beneath him, and he was displeased. But Gaia was not finished. She bore one more brood of children. 3 more sons. And these were the most terrible of all. They were the Hecatoncheires, the 100-handed ones. Their names were Cronus, Briareos, and Gyges. They were even larger than the Cyclopes. Their power was unthinkable. It was the power of the earthquake, the landslide, the tidal wave. It was total, overwhelming physical force. And their appearance. Each of them had 50 heads, 50 faces looking in all directions. And from their massive shoulders sprouted 100 arms, 100 powerful, irresistible hands. They were not evil. They were not malicious. They were simply too much. They were the embodiment of chaos given form. The raw, uncontainable physical power of the earth. When they moved, the very foundations of Gaia groaned. When they shouted, with the voices of 50 throats, the cosmos itself seemed to shudder. They were beings of such overwhelming might that no one and nothing could stand against them. And now the family was complete. The 12 Titans, beings of order and intellect. The 3 Cyclopes, beings of fire and the forge. And the 3 Hecatoncheires, beings of raw, irresistible force. All of them, all 18, were held deep within the body of their mother Gaia. And their father Ouranos, the sky, who lay upon her, he knew them. He felt their power. He felt the thunder of the forge. He felt the heave of the 100-handed. And he was afraid. The tyranny of Ouranos was the first king, the first ruler. And like many rulers to come, his greatest fear was being overthrown. He looked at the 12 Titans, his beautiful children, and he felt a measure of pride. But it was a pride poisoned with fear. He looked at the Cyclopes with their one burning eye and their mastery of fire and thunder, and he felt disgust. They were unruly. They were ugly to him. They were a threat. And he looked at the hecaton chairs, the 100-handed ones, with their 50 heads and their unimaginable strength, and he was terrified. He saw in them the end of his rule. He saw in their chaotic power a force that he could not control. And so Ouranos, the starry sky, the first father, committed the first great crime. He did not just banish his children. He did not send them away. He took his most monstrous children, the 3 Cyclopes and the 3 hecaton chairs, and one by one he forced them back. He shoved them down, 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 deep into the body of Gaia. He pushed them from her womb, where they were waiting to be born, back into the deepest, darkest, most secret recesses of the earth. He forced them down into the depths, into a place that was almost as deep as Tartarus itself. He bound them there, in the choking, crushing, agonizing darkness, deep within their mother. And as he did this, as he imprisoned his own children in the body of his own wife, Hesiod tells us that Ouranos rejoiced in his evil deed. He was proud. He had secured his throne. He had hidden away the evidence of his monstrous fertility. He had crushed the first rebellion before it could even be imagined. He was the first tyrant. And he lay upon Gaia, pressing down, a heavy, suffocating, starry blanket. A king and a jailer. The suffering of Gaia in Gaia, Gaia groaned. Imagine her agony. It was not just the pain of a mother whose children are taken. It was the pain of a mother who is forced to be the prison for her own children. She was the earth. She was the prison. She could feel them. Deep within her, she could feel the thunder of Bronze, muffled and enraged. She could feel the fire of Arges, burning in her deepest bedrock. She could feel the struggle of the 100-handed ones, their 100 arms for each pushing, tearing, heaving against her insides, trying to get free. Her whole body was racked with pain. The first silent screaming earthquakes. The pressure was building. Her mountains ached. Her plains were stretched taut. She was filled with the furious, trapped, agonizing power of her 6 most powerful sons. And she was filled with a mother's rage. She looked up, or rather felt the weight of the husband who lay upon her. The husband who had betrayed her. The husband who had mutilated their family and turned her body into a dungeon. She could not bear it. The weight of Ouranos above. The pain of her children within. She was the broad-bosomed earth. She was the foundation. She was the mother of all. And she would not endure it. Her great, slow, patient mind, the mind of the stone and the soil, began to think. It began to plot. Her pain turned to resolve. Her resolve turned to a cold, hard, terrible plan. If Ouranos would not move, he would be moved. If he would not release her children, he would be punished. The plot and the sickle deep within herself, in the places where the fire of the Cyclopes had touched the stone, Gaia began to create something new. She took the minerals of her own body. The iron, the stone, the unbending will, and she forged a new substance. The ancient poets called it adamant, or adamantine. It was a metal, but not a metal. It was gray. It was cold. It was impossibly hard. It was unbreakable. It was the substance of destiny. And from this adamant, Gaia, the mother of the earth, fashioned a tool. It was not a sword. It was not a spear. It was a tool of the field. It was a sickle. A great, massive, jagged-toothed sickle. A harvesting tool. The kind of tool that is used to cut. The cold, hard, gray, unbreakable sickle, born of a mother's agony and rage. And then she spoke. Her voice was not a sound. It was a rumbling, a tremor in the earth. A whisper that traveled through the roots of the mountains, into the places where her other children, the 12 Titans, were also hidden. They were not imprisoned like their brothers. They were just held back, prevented from being born, from seeing the light. They, too, were trapped in the darkness between their mother's substance and their father's unmoving body. She spoke to them all. "My children," her voice whispered through the stone, "children of a wicked father. He has imprisoned your brothers. He has filled my body with pain. He has shamed us, and he has shamed himself. Will you help me? Will you help your mother? Will you punish this father who has wronged us all? Or will you cower in the darkness forever?" She showed them the weapon, the great gleaming gray-toothed sickle. And the Titans, they were afraid. They heard their mother's plea. They felt her rage. But they also felt the immense, all-encompassing power of their father, Ouranos, the sky, who pressed down on everything. He was the king. He was absolute. To move against him was unthinkable. Oceanus, the great river, stayed aloof, his waters swirling at the edge of the world. He would have no part in this. The others, Cronus, Creus, Hyperion, Ipetus, they were silent. They were gripped by the first fear. Silence. The deep, dark, pressurized silence of the trapped earth. And then one voice spoke. A quiet, cunning voice. The voice of the youngest. "Cronus." "The rise of Cronus, mother," he said, his voice cold and hard as the sickle itself. "I will do it. I am not afraid of this. This father of ours. He has no right to the name. He was the first to do a shameful thing. He was the first to bring evil into this world. I will take this weapon, and I will do the deed. For my own ambition, yes, but also for you, and for my brothers." Cronus the cunning, the ambitious, the one who had always resented his father's suffocating presence. He was the only one who dared. And Gaia, she rejoiced. Her heart, the very core of the earth, swelled with a terrible, joyful relief. She gave the great, adamantine sickle to her youngest son. He took it. His hand closed around the cold, unyielding hilt. He felt its weight. The weight of kingship. The weight of the first, terrible sin. And Gaia told him the plan. She set an ambush. She hid Cronus. She found a place, a secret cleft in the earth, a place of hiding. And she waited. And with Cronus in that hiding place, she set his 4 brothers who had been swayed by his courage, Cronus, Creus, Hyperion, and Ipetus. They would be the 4 pillars to hold their father down. The rhythm of the new world continued. Hemera, the day, finished her bright journey. And Nyx, the great, veiled, primordial night, began to rise from her dark home. She spread her vast, dark, comforting cloak over the cosmos. It was night. The world was dark. And Ouranos, the sky, felt the stir of Eros, the desire for his wife, Gaia. He did not know of the plot. He did not know of the sickle. He suspected nothing. He was the king. He was all-powerful. And so, as he did every night, Ouranos, the starry sky, began to descend. He moved to cover Gaia completely, to embrace her. He was vast. He was heavy. He was the universe. And he was unsuspecting. The great separation as Ouranos drew close, as he settled upon the earth, the trap was sprung. From the 4 corners of the world, the 4 brothers, Cronus, Creus, Hyperion, and Ipetus, rose up. They were the 4 great pillars. They seized their father. They held him fast. They held the sky, pinning him to the earth. And Ouranos roared. He struggled, but he was held. And then from his hiding place came Cronus. In his left hand, which would forever after be the hand of Ilomen, he reached out. He grasped his father, and in his right hand he raised the great gray, jagged sickle of adamantine. He swung it, one swift, terrible cutting motion. He severed his father. He castrated Ouranos. The cry of Ouranos was a sound that had never been heard. It was the sound of the cosmos itself being torn, a sound of such agony and rage that it shook the foundations of Gaia, and the depths of Tartarus, and the bright upper air of Ether. And then Ouranos recoiled. With a great, convulsive, agonizing heave, he pulled away from the earth. He pulled up. He pulled away. And for the first time, for the very first time, the sky and the earth were apart. A space was created between them. The atmosphere, the air we breathe. The world was no longer a suffocating embrace. It was a world of space, of distance. The great, bloody, violent act of separation was complete. The sky was now up there. The earth was down here. And Cronus stood breathing on the new, open surface of the world, the terrible, bloody sickle in his hand. He was the new king. The births from blood and sea Cronus, in his terrible victory, took the severed, awful proof of his deed, and he cast it away. He hurled it over his shoulder back into the darkness, not caring where it fell. But the work of creation was not over. Even this act of violence was creative. The great adamantine sickle was dripping. It dripped with the divine, immortal blood of Ouranos. And these drops of blood, they fell down, and they landed on the earth. They landed on Gaia. And Gaia, the earth, received the blood of her husband. And from this blood she conceived. From these dark, violent, angry drops of blood sprang a new brood. First came the Ouranos, the Furies, the three sisters of vengeance, Alecto the unceasing, Megaera the grudging, Tisiphone the vengeful. They were dark-winged goddesses with snakes for hair, and their eyes dripped blood. They were the spirits of punishment. They were the anger of the earth, born of blood. They were the ones who would hunt down and punish anyone who broke a sacred oath, or who, like Cronus, committed a crime against their own family. They were the embodied curse of Ouranos. And from the blood also sprang the gigantes. The giants, immense, powerful, warlike beings. They were born not as infants but as full-grown warriors, clad in shining, glittering armor, holding great, long spears. They were children of violence, and they were destined for a great, terrible war. And finally, from the blood came the Meliae, the ash tree nymphs, the nymphs of the hardy, strong, unbending ash tree, the tree from which the shafts of spears would one day be cut. They were the spirits of the battlewood. The earth had given birth to vengeance, to war, and to the tools of war. But what of the other part? The part that Cronus had thrown. It flew through the new, dark air. It sailed over the land, over the sea. And it fell into the sea, into the waters of Pontus. And the sea, the restless salt sea, began to churn. It foamed. A great, white, swirling, divine foam began to gather around the immortal flesh. The Greek word for this foam is aphras. And from this foam, from this mixture of the violent, severed God and the nurturing salt sea, a new being began to form. She rose from the waves. She was not a child. She was a woman. Grown. Perfect. She was beauty itself. She was Aphrodite, the goddess of love, the goddess of beauty, the goddess of desire, born not of a mother, born not of a womb, born of violence and the sea. She was so beautiful that the very waves rejoiced. The air around her grew warm. She floated on the foam, and the winds carried her, first to the island of Cythera, and then to Cyprus. And where she stepped, From the soft white sand flowers grew. The most terrible act of violence had given birth to the most profound, unshakable beauty, and to a new, more complicated, more dangerous kind of love. The new king in Cronus, Cronus was king. The great blue wounded body of Ouranos was now the sky. Fixed, distant, powerless, he could only watch, and he could only curse his son. He cursed Cronus. He cursed the Titans, calling them the strainers, for they had strained their power to do this deed. And he foretold that just as Cronus had overthrown his father, so too would Cronus be overthrown by his own son. But Cronus did not care. Not yet. He was the master of the universe. He and his brothers and sisters, the Titans, were free. They emerged from the darkness onto the new, open earth. They were the new gods. They divided the cosmos. Cronus was the king of all. Oceanus ruled his great, outer river. Hyperion and Theia took charge of the sun and moon. Cous and Creus, Ipetus and Phoebe, they all took their domains. Rhea, Themis, Mnemosyne, they were the great queens of this new age. It was the dawn of the Titans' rule. The dawn of what would one day be called the Golden Age. And what of the Cyclopes? And the Hecatoncheires? The hundred-handed ones? What of the brothers that Cronus had supposedly saved? Gaia rejoiced. Her pain was gone. Her children were free. She begged her son, Cronus, the new king, to go down into the dark depths and release his brothers, the great smiths, the great warriors. And Cronus looked down into the darkness of Tartarus. He saw the one-eyed smiths with their chaotic fire. He saw the hundred-handed ones with their 50 heads and their terrifying, overwhelming strength. And just like his father, Ouranos, he was afraid. He saw in them a threat to his new throne. And so Cronus, the great liberator, became the new tyrant. He betrayed his mother. He broke his unspoken promise. He left his brothers in their prison. He reinforced their bonds. He set a great dragon, Camper, to guard them. He had become everything he had overthrown. He had taken his father's place in every single way. The age of the Titans had begun. But it was an age founded on a terrible crime. An age poisoned by a father's curse. An age guarded by a guilty, fearful king. And that is a story for another time. For now the world is quiet. The sky is far above. The earth is still below. The new gods, the Titans, rule. And in the deep, deep dark, the Cyclopes and the hundred-handed ones wait. And so it is time for you too to wait. To rest. To let the stories of this ancient, violent, beautiful new world settle. Let the sound of my voice fade. Let the world around you dissolve. There is only the comfortable darkness, the safe, quiet darkness of Nyx. The gentle, healing touch of her son, Hypnos. Allow yourself to drift. Allow yourself to let go. Thank you for joining me here at the Slumbering Mythos. I hope this story has brought you peace and calm. If you've enjoyed this journey, please in the quiet, subscribe, and let your own dreams begin. Good night. Sleep well.